do. Welcome, everyone. It's now 7:03, and we know that some people will continue to join over the next few minutes, but we'll go ahead and get started now. We're grateful for Fairstream and for their willingness to host us on this platform, and I am super excited to introduce our speaker tonight. It is Laura McCarty, who is a VP of America's Technical Services at Pure Storage. And for those of you who don't know, I don't know that everyone joining us tonight knows that Pure Storage has been one of our major sponsors at Tech Moms over the past year through their Pure Good Foundation. And as we started this conversation about ways that we could be engaged and working together, we really touched on the idea that so many women start their tech careers in technical support. And it is a place where it's a nice entry-level starting place, but sometimes we're not always sure how the path moves forward from that into our next steps. And as we were talking to a couple of the team leads here in the Utah office, I think it was probably Jennifer Asplund who said, I know the perfect person to come and speak to your women about how to build a career starting from the very entry level and how the sky is the limit for your opportunities. So that is what we're going to be talking about tonight. We have Laura McCarty here, my career as a jungle gym. So Laura, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and we'll just take it from there.
Thank you, Robin. And it's really, I've been looking forward to this event for, I don't know, since Jennifer told me about it. Tech Moms I am a tech mom, and it warms my heart that I get to share some tips and tricks today. So Jennifer, if you would like, can you just bring up the slides for me? So I have always sort of thought of my career as a jungle gym, and some of this will probably resonate out there with all of you. I've been in the industry for longer than I want to say, so we won't go there. But I actually was a communications major in college, and came out of college, I was going to be a journalist, and I was supposed to work for a business magazine, and my career was on a track. And then they closed down the business magazine, and I had a rent to pay. And I had an apartment leased, and I had no way to make a dime. And so I ended up in a very strange journey. So Jennifer, if you want to go to the next slide. So I was in this conundrum because I had my path charted. I was on a track. I was going to be a writer. I was going to be a journalist. And then all of a sudden I wasn't. So what did I do? Well, I ended up actually starting as a salesperson. Now, if any of you know me on this call or have heard me talk, I am the worst possible salesperson you will ever meet. And the reason for that is because I like to help people and I love people, and I just couldn't sell things. I wasn't very good at it, but I started as a salesperson. It did pay the rent. It didn't pay the rent very well because I didn't sell very much. And then I realized, okay, well, that's not working very well. What can I do? And there was a job at the water company at the city of Del Mar. So I went to school in San Diego. And it was a drought. So my first foray into customer service was people calling the city of Del Mar to ask me why their bill was triple the amount it should be, and yell at me for that. So I learned early on how to deal with a difficult customer, and I found that I was actually quite a bit better at that. A little later, I ended up in Silicon Valley with the man that I was just about to marry. And again, I got into sales. Don't know how that happened. Kind of went back a step because, I'm still like, I want to be a writer, but just still wasn't working for me. And we needed to pay our rent and eat. So was though now in the place that is now Silicon Valley, right? And so I kind of worked several jobs. I actually answered phones. I was the front desk person at many Silicon Valley startups for a few years. This is probably resonating with some of you. And then finally, someone said to me, if you still want to be a writer, there's actually this thing called technical writing. And I said, really? That sounds wonderful. And I interviewed with a company called Cisco Systems. So in those days, nobody knew what Cisco was. They all thought it was the food company. There's still many people who think it's the food company, but as many of you probably know, it's actually the biggest networking company in the world. But it wasn't that. It was a small startup. It had 3,000 or 4,000 people, so not too small. And I went in and I interviewed because I actually knew someone. So tip there, always use your network. Whenever you're talking to someone, you might find your next big career with just talking about what you do. And they gave me a chance to be a technical writer for Cisco for the tech support group, which was so perfect because I'd actually done inside sales, I'd done customer service, and I had actually done some tech support. When your dongle didn't have the right code, they would call and I was, on the phone helping with that. So that was my tech support experience. So I became the tech writer for Cisco, the first one in the tech support division. And basically I ended up hosting their emails to help customers with their problems when the web first started. So now I'm probably talking about when many of you were born, which is all still good, right? Because I know my kids would laugh at that. And we basically created the web and I got to do everything. So I got to do writing, I got to help with employee development. We realized there was no way to train our engineers. We were hiring our customers and that wouldn't scale because we needed our customers to actually buy more stuff. We couldn't just hire all the people. So I started the training division and helped with that. And then that worked so well that I created a training product that wasn't just for our technical support engineers, but we sold it to our customers. And our customers then became trained on how to use Cisco equipment, how to run their network. And with that, I even trained myself and I got what was called a CCNA. So lo and behold, within the first 5 years of my career, I went from a communications major to a CCNA, which is a technical certification. And all of a sudden I was in tech. And at the same time, I had my first child. So lo and behold, I was a tech mom, right? I never thought I was still like, I'm not technical. I don't understand that stuff. Well, I was actually writing about it. So I think I might've been a little bit wrong about that, but we all do that. We underestimate ourselves. So technical writer, training, leadership development. Cisco ended up starting a leadership development program for all of their employees. And I ran that. And then I ended up getting another certification because people told me, what you've been doing all this time is program management. I wasn't writing as much. I was actually running these large programs. And they said, go get this thing called a PMP. So I went and got a certification. And right about that time, somebody said, we're finally going to make you a manager. Because I didn't want to manage. I had young kids. I actually worked part-time at Cisco for 5 years, which was awesome when my kids were little. And got that PMP certification. They said, we want you to lead our PMO. When it started, there was no people, but all of a sudden there was people. And then I had to lead all these programs. And from that, you can see I did that. I led operations. All of this time, I was actually still in tech support. So I was just running the operations for tech support or the strategy and planning for tech support. Or at a certain point, they said, well, you've done really well at that, but you're not technical. So once again, I had reinvented myself to the point that they didn't think I was technical. So somebody said, well, why don't you take a technical team? So I took my first team of engineers and I created a model for technical solutions for our customers that was with our partners. And that actually became a $1 billion business at Cisco. So pretty darn cool, huh? It went from 1 team to 3 teams to 6 teams to that business, which I don't even know how many teams there are now. And then I was like, well, that was awesome. And that was really fun. And I'd done a lot. And we had some leadership changes at Cisco. And one of my favorite bosses had moved roles. And he said, well, do you want to learn something totally different? And I said, sure. So he said, well, come over to professional services from technical services and run service provider. So I said, hey, why not? And I went and I learned that. And within the first 4 months of that job, I ended up with the entire division, almost 1,000 people. Wasn't one I was like ready for, but that was how the whole reorg at Cisco happened. And I ended up having a web team, having a telco team, having all kinds of teams, cable and media, service provider. If any of you have worked in it, it is a man's world. There are no women. You just don't look. You look around, you don't find them. So it was kind of incredible for me to have that job, and it was really fun when I got to walk in some of the biggest customers in the world office and be that person representing the company that I was with. So I had a blast, but I got a little bit tired, and I was just becoming an empty nester, and I was really excited about that because my kids have now grown up, and I'll talk a little bit more about my incredible children. I decided to take retirement from Cisco, and I took a few months off, and I was going to take more months off, but this is where your network comes into play again. And I had someone from my network who actually is the head chief customer experience officer at Pure, basically say, hey, what would it take to get you to come back and lead a tech support division for me? And it was an easy choice. It's a great company. I'm having a blast. I have an incredible team. And I'm really excited to be part of the Utah community. I have now been there, I think 5 times, even in the COVID world. I've been able to travel safely from San Jose to Utah. We have reopened the office slowly. We're having a bunch of fun when we can. And then I'm having a great time meeting everybody on Zoom as well. But I, as you can see, just decided to do from this picture, whatever I was interested in, I wanted to learn and could have an impact on people. And with that, look at all of the different things I've got to do. And I'm still climbing around the jungle gym because it's still really fun. And there's probably more that I get to do. I put customer experience on the top because I'm still going. And at some point, I want to be the chief customer officer for a company. Might be Pure, might be somewhere else, but I'm going to keep going until hopefully I reach that goal. And that's what I would say to all of you is, enjoy what you're doing today. Think about what you want to do tomorrow and have lofty goals, because I didn't used to have lofty goals, but they all seem to come about. And then as I started to chart them and plan them, it went even faster. So you can all do anything. And you don't have to start technical, you can be technical. I have people today tell me I'm thinking too much like an engineer. Whenever they do that, I break out clapping, and I'm so excited because if I'm thinking like an engineer, that means they think I'm an engineer. And so it doesn't matter that I wasn't trained that way. I have learned it, right? And we all can learn it. So the jungle gym is fun. This one here is what I climbed on when I was a kid, again, before many of you maybe were born. And when you fell down, it hurt. So I'll tell you later about where I found a new jungle gym later. And that's kind of fun too. So this one is a little bit dangerous. And it was, especially as a Midwestern girl who was taught that she only had one role, and that was to go get married and have children. I think I've decided that, I did that, but I also have been able to do a few things, other things along the way. So Jennifer, next slide. So this is how I did it a little bit. So this is my village. And I will tell every one of you that it does take a village. It takes your girlfriends, it takes your network, it takes your team, it takes your partner, and it takes your parents if you still have them, or your family. And you can see on the right-hand side, the loves of my life. So the baby picture is my son, Keenan, holding his baby brother, Ryan, getting ready for Christmas. And to me, that seems like yesterday, but that was when they were 4 and 1. The picture on the left side is us in La Jolla just recently. This summer, Keenan has his mask, so you can see where we were. He is 23 and Ryan is 20. So Keenan is a senior at University of Southern California. which is an incredible place to go to school. And Ryan is a junior. Even though they're not that close in school, Kennan's taking a little bit longer path, as I'm sure many of your children may or will do. But Ryan is a junior in game design in UC Santa Cruz. So couldn't have more opposite schools, couldn't have more opposite kids, but they're best friends. And when they were 5 and 8, I was divorced and became a single mother at that point. So the career became important so that I could put food on the table, so I could have a nice house, and so I could help them along their journey to get the education that they're getting right now. And I'm super proud of them. That's the most important part. We can talk all day long about my career, but they were always first. And I have some tips on how to make them first and how to still have a great career. So let's talk about that next. All right, Jennifer, if you could just go to the next slide. So some tips. How did I do this? It might look kind of easy from that slide, but it wasn't, right? It was very, very difficult. And to be honest with you, I was kind of a shy introvert. You would never know that now, but I'm still slightly introverted. My team would call me extroverted to the maximum. But at the time, you know, early 20s, we don't have that confidence. I was very shy. I wasn't even sure how to be a mom. I barely babysat, right? So I ended up, you know, late 20s having my first child, and I wanted to work part-time, but I wanted to have a career as well. And that's when I was doing tech writing and I was starting that training team. But I actually asked my leaders if I could go part-time. And even though it wasn't an official program or it wasn't officially done, they let me do it. And so that's a really cool thing is you never know what you can do if you don't ask. That's one of my points. But so they let me do that. Though I would come home from work on the 3 days that I would go into the office and I would be exhausted. But with that, I would find a way. I would say that the most important thing when they get home is that my kids have quality time with me. So with my older son, I would take him to the park every day. I wouldn't sit down. I would just come in the house, grab him in the stroller, and we'd go to the park. And that would rejuvenate me because I was outside. And that would also give him some quality time with mom. As I had two, it got a little bit harder to do that. But one of the things we would do is all plop down on the floor and we would play with our trains, or we would do a game of Candyland, or we would do whatever it was. But I will tell you that a lot of the moms that I knew at the time that weren't working moms would say to me, Laura, we never sit on the floor with our kids. We never spend the time that you spend focusing on them. And whether that was a half an hour or an hour or 12 minutes, if it was the story time before bed, I made sure that every single day I looked my kids in the eye and had time with them that wasn't focused on other things. And in the age of technology and phones and iPads and all of these things and all of our day-to-day and all of the responsibilities we have, I would just encourage you to take that time. I built Star Wars Lego ships with my youngest son. We still have some incredible ones that, you know, we did together. It was fun for me. It was fun for them. We did puzzles when they got older. I read books with Ryan. We read a whole dragon series that every single night he would read a chapter, I would read a chapter. So there's all kinds of tips and hints. It doesn't take, you don't have to be with them the full day. For that little bit of time, I would encourage you to do it, because you're going to blink from that baby stage and all of a sudden my house is really quiet this week because my youngest son has gone back to school. I'm like, who's going to play puzzles with me? Who's going to do this stuff with me, right? And you're going to miss it. So they will grow up. They do grow up. They grow up very fast. So enjoy every stage. And the adult stages can be very hard for those who have adult children. Jennifer and I were discussing this morning, but it's still something you want. You always want them to come to you. When I was in my 20s, maybe early 30s, and I was working really hard on a project and I was exhausted and I wasn't focused on my home life as much as I should, somebody said to me, Laura, they're not going to say she was a great Cisco employee on your tombstone, right? They're not going to do that. What do you want on your tombstone? It's about your family. It's about the people you've impacted. It's about the way you've changed society, right? Now we have to work, we have to have that career, but that's not what's going to be on our tombstones. So as you guys are like, how do I climb that ladder? How do I do this? How do I do more faster? Go, 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 go. Think about that. We're going to work for a really long time, but we're only going to have our kids for that part of the time that you have until they go off on their own, right? So that was one that when somebody said that to me, it has resonated. So I'm going to say it to all of you so you can think about that when you're killing yourself over a project, but it might have been better to run out with your kids to get the crayons and the glue stick to get them to help them with the project for the next day, which I always complained about. You know, that actually is the thing that you want to do, right? So the next one is really, really fun and important. So when I was in the early days of my career, I was really pretty good at what I did. Did I know it? No. Did I talk about it? No. Did my boss know what I was doing? No. So I just expected that everyone would know all these great and incredible things I was doing, right? Because I knew I was executing like crazy. I was getting things done. I was checking things off my list. I was, you know, doing all these things, leading these projects, and I never told anybody, so who knew? Nobody, right? A few people noticed, right? A few people liked what I did, and I had success, but I wasn't getting promoted, and maybe the man in the cube next to me or another woman in the cube next to me was getting the promotions, and I was like, I don't understand. And I actually went and interviewed for other jobs because I thought, well, maybe that's it. Maybe I have to go interview for other jobs. And then there wasn't the flexibility that I had. I couldn't do all the fun stuff I was doing. I was like, well, I don't want to do that. So I said to my boss at the time, I don't understand. I'm doing what I think are all the right things and nothing's happening. And she said, oh, really? What are you doing? And then I went down the list of things that I was doing, and she goes, oh, that would have been really great if I knew that when I wrote your review. So I'm here to tell you that when you think you're bragging or you're being arrogant or you are like, I don't want to say that, I don't want to talk about that, oh my gosh, that's just, I'm not that person. Be careful that you're not they just have no idea because you haven't said a word. So guess what? As I slowly started to say, well, we as a team did this, or we executed this, or we were able to do this, and I would send more notes of status updates about the things that we were accomplishing, and I would, you know, talk a little bit more about mainly me and the team, because it wasn't really all about me, it was really about my teams. Gosh, what happened? I started to get noticed. And I actually got recruited to come back to technical support to run the PMO and run the strategy and initiatives for all of the tech support. But that would have never happened if I hadn't started speaking up. So just a hint, again, it's not bragging, it's not arrogant. Your leaders and managers and bosses are really busy people. And it's not that they don't want to know. It's just that many times they don't have time or they don't see it unless you let them know. So speak up, let them know, right? It's okay. Take some credit for all the amazing work that you women are doing every single day, okay? So very good lesson for me to learn. Hadn't learned it, I don't know, probably would not be sitting doing this fun stuff today, right? So the other piece of that is to use your voice. And this, even though it's all in the same bullet here, they're kind of two different things. I mean, use your voice even when you're in a meeting, right? So when you get on a call, say hello. And I don't care if you're talking about the weather. I don't care if you are talking about the hassle you had walking your child to school in the morning. It doesn't matter. If you start that call in the conversation using your voice, when later on in the call or in the meeting room, when we get back to meeting rooms, so hopeful that we'll get there, your voice will be heard in a different way. So say hello, be part of the conversation, turn on your video so people can see you, right? Even if you're like me, just back from Zoom and your hair sticking up on the top of your head, I start my day in my workout clothes. Somewhere magically during the day, my team sees me change into what you see I'm wearing right now, because I do a ton of customer calls, so I have to dress for that role, even on Zoom. But it's still important for people to see you and for people to hear you. And it doesn't matter what you start with, just have your voice heard. And then later on, the other thing don't do is I'm going to think about the perfect response to this. Thinking about that perfect response, thinking about it and thinking about it. By the time you get it out, somebody else will have taken that space. Go ahead and say it. It's okay. You probably have a really good response, or you're getting out something that could be discussed. So don't make it perfect. Just join the conversation. And when you join the conversation, it makes the conversation better. And I'm sorry to say it, I'm sure there's wonderful men on the phone. Women have a little trouble speaking up sometimes, so we need to get our words in, and we need to be listened to, and we need to have wonderful men around us who will actually say, hey, Laura, that was a really great point that you just made. How do we do that? What do we do? How can we help you, right? And, bring those folks into the conversation as well. But if you do nothing after this call, but put a little sticky note on your keyboard that says use your voice and try it a couple times tomorrow, I'll be super thrilled. Okay. So the other thing I would say is it's okay to ask, right? And this is for all men that are on the call and all women too, because actually I think this one actually is more relevant to our men and maybe even our single dads out there if we have any of them on here. When your child is going to have that Halloween parade, which is coming up in a few weeks, I hope, and you want to go, ask, say, can I take off from 10 to noon to go to watch my kids' Halloween parade or participate in that? And guess what? The answer almost always is going to be yes. Especially if maybe you've planned it, if you are in tech support and we have shifts and we have things we have to do, if you've planned it a few days in advance, we are going to find a way to get you those hours to be able to go see your child, right? I don't get any more Halloween parades. I'm very sad. I'm probably going to go sneak down to the elementary school in a few weeks and just see if they're there so that I can just see them, right? So I had a man that was a peer manager of mine, probably 10 years ago, and his boss was a woman, and he had a child at the same school. And I was talking about the Halloween parade, and Marianne said, well, David hasn't said anything to me about this Halloween parade. Do you think David needs to go? And I said, well, I hope he'll go. And she called him and left him a voicemail and said, David Kurtz, if you do not participate in that Halloween party with your kids, I'm not sure what I will do to you. And he came up to me and he was so appreciative because he wouldn't have asked and he wouldn't have gone and he would have missed it. So ask. What if someone actually has to say no? Then all they can do is say no. It doesn't hurt anybody. But if you don't ask and you don't go, you don't get to participate, do you? Right? And the same thing, if there's a stretch assignment you think maybe you could do, but you don't want to speak up and ask if you might do it, are you going to get the stretch assignment? No. So I raised my hand for all kinds of stretch assignments. And guess what? Even if I wasn't at all qualified, I managed generally to get them. And then I learned something along the way, right? So please ask. And people want to say yes. That's the way it goes. And it's really fun that way. The next one is my 24-hour rule. So I broke my own rule just a few days ago. I'll talk about that. So my 24-hour rule is when you are really upset with someone because of an email, because of a text, because of a Slack, because of a phone interaction or a Zoom meeting, and you just are so upset and so angry and so just don't know what to do with yourself, I would tell you, please take a breath. Please remove yourself from the situation and give it 24 hours. And then in 24 hours, approach that person or that individual or that whatever you have to do if it's an email, and respond with what you've thought about in that interaction after 24 hours. I broke this rule the other day and I regret it. I sent an email I shouldn't have sent, and there was one line in it that just, I still want to take it back and like swallow it back, you know? And I actually had my boss copied when I did it. And my partner came up behind me and I said, here's the email I sent. And he read that last line and he went, oh. He didn't say anything. Good guy, right? He just went, oh. And I went, oh no. I didn't use my 24-hour rule and I hurt somebody's feelings. So I got on the phone right away and I had a phone conversation and I apologized. But I really, really wish I'd waited my 24 hours and it would have been a better outcome, right? So this is only when you're really, really upset, but also we read emails wrong. I once read an email where it said not, I thought it was yes and it was no. And so I got so mad that they were saying no to me when they were actually saying yes to me. And then I saw the person in the cafeteria and they're like, Laura, you read it wrong. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know? So all of these fun stories are for all of you. When you've done things like this, we all do it. We all make those mistakes. We will all fall down. Try it. Just, these are some tips to keep you out of trouble. And then I would encourage all of you, find great mentors, find great sponsors. And when I say men are great at this, the reason is, the only reason I am sitting here today is because of all the wonderful men that took me under their wing, that sponsored me, that taught me lessons I needed to be taught. There weren't enough women to mentor women in my day, sadly. And you know, you know, we all, the women who are mentoring 25 people, right? So they might not be able to focus on that specific thing you need. Men love to teach. They want to help you, right? So it's okay to ask somebody you really admire, or okay to ask them if they have a skill set that you want, that they're the best at. Ask them how they got there, how they did it. So I would say, be willing to do that, because all of my roles are truly, I mean, even this job at Pure Storage is because I used my network, right? Because someone said to me, oh my gosh, this is going to be something that you can be incredible at, right? So would you consider coming to help and do that? And then I would also say, and we still make this mistake, it doesn't matter if you're my age or if you're born when my kids you're just a little bit older than my children. Women compete with each other. We cannot help ourselves. It's just the way we roll. I will tell you, don't do it. Lift each other up, work together, celebrate each other's success, pull each other with you. Do not we are our own worst enemy. Do not compete with the women you are working with and partnering with. Do not judge them harsher than you might judge their male counterpart. And always think about, if you do read Sheryl Sandberg's book, if that person was named Sam, would you have had a different reaction than if that person was named Sarah? And if someone is treating you a way that you're not sure, think, would they have treated Sam differently than they treated Laura? If the answer is yes, then you might want to have a conversation, or you might want to help educate them on what they could do differently to treat Sarah better or Laura better, right? but lift each other up because we are one team. The jungle gym on the right is when I went to San Francisco recently. There was a nicely, beautifully padded playground with little kids in San Francisco. And it's much more colorful than the one I grew up on. And I climbed up, and I am just so excited because now if I fall, it's going to be a little bit softer, and it's so much fun. So I encourage all of you to find your spaces on the jungle gym. Some of them like sales for me, not the right space, move to the next one. You don't always have to go up because you have kids at home. They are what you need to, when asked for recently for Women of Utah, what is my greatest achievement? My answer was Keenan and Ryan. They're in college, they're happy, they laugh, they love their lives. The two boys I raised as a single mom are my greatest accomplishment. It is not being the vice president of Pure Storage. That is a huge accomplishment as well. But remember, you have several things where you can be incredibly successful and you can have a lot of fun doing it. So I'm excited to open it up now for some questions.
Thank you so much. I've got so many questions, and we've been seeing things. Lots of comments coming in the chat. This sounds so familiar. I recognize, and the women who are in this room tonight are really relating to what you're talking about. So, first question is: when you face that initial setback right at the very beginning of your career, right out of school, when you had that plan, and then the magazine closed, how did you overcome that disappointment and pivot to something new?
Yeah, I mean, the first reaction, I think, is fear, right? It was kind of terrifying. I had just signed a lease in La Jolla. If any of you guys know where La Jolla is in San Diego, it's not an inexpensive place. And the man I was going to marry was still in school, so he couldn't help me, right? The next was, I will find a way, right? And I started looking for jobs, and it didn't matter what job it was, right? I ended up getting like a financial securities license. I think I was selling mutual fund, but hey, I just and I continued to try and, I think I must have applied for 20 copy editor jobs and I didn't get them. And then one of them I got, but it wasn't enough to pay the rent. So I had to turn it down. So I was actually going to make it in my field, but I couldn't pay the rent. So then I had to make different choices. Now think about that. If I'd chosen the copy editor job, what would the difference be? So I think it was just determination, which I think we all know and we all have, right? We got through college, or we got to where we are, and you just got to course correct. But it took some time. And there was, for probably the first 5 years, I was like, oh, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get back to doing something I love, right?
I love that question because it shows such a willingness to, even though you have your eye on a goal, and even when that goal isn't realized, we still can have that in our mind, right? Like that's what we want to be doing, even when we're going down another path. But I loved how eventually you were able to recognize, I can create a new goal.
Right.
And I can start with something new, even if I don't get back to that place I wanted, there are other places where I can have just as much fun, if not more fun, and be more successful.
Right. And I would say one of the things I did as I sort of started in my career, and I kind of just kept getting course corrected by what the company needed or what the people needed. And then I would maybe interview for something different. And then we'll say, what's your strength? And I'm sure we've all done this. Well, my strength is people. And as all of you can tell, my strength truly is people, but that doesn't really get you a job, does it? So when it turned to, I want to lead people in this organization to do this, it's the same thing, but it's now with a goal, right? So I would encourage you to have a chart, a path. And I had 3 jobs in mind once I took that final role at Cisco. And one of those roles was on the list, right? So you can have five things that are interesting to you, But then you have to figure out, well, how am I going to get there? Because I didn't have any professional services. I didn't have any professional services experience, but I knew that that was a place that probably I could do very well at, and I wanted to learn. So have a goal, have a plan, and writing it down. Even if you end up doing something completely different, at least you wrote it down, and you knew that maybe even that will happen in another 5 years. You go professional services. I probably wrote down early in my career. I forgot about it, and then later it came back. Right. So yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, we've got a question from Miranda in the chat. I'd be so interested to hear any ideas, suggestions, or wisdom regarding building a network after a large gap in employment or away from your goal career path. So a lot of our women have taken that break. And when you talked about how your network was everything, how do we, I want to break that into two parts. How do we keep our network going if we do take a break? And if we're returning a little bit later and we don't have much of a professional network, how do we start to build it?
Yeah, so great question. And I was just telling someone this morning, I don't remember who it was. I think we need to have a way to get better at bringing moms back into the workforce, because all of you had wonderful careers, I'm sure, before you had children. And, at a certain point, they are going to go away, and then you want to get back in. So a couple of things I would say: there are many women's groups out there. In the Valley, there's a one called WITI, Women in Technology. There are coffee chats. There are groups probably like this one that eventually could meet back in person. Go to those events, network with folks, make yourself a little card, right? Doesn't matter, just start saying, hey, would you like to have coffee? I'd love to understand this, or I'd love to have that. Can I'll start over a coffee, right? LinkedIn, I would say, use it. Even if you have had a gap in career, you still have wonderful skills. People from early in your career can still do a reference for you. You can find roles that way. And you can also just messenger people, and they might, I would say yes to many conversations, right? So, and then the people that you socialize with, many of them have cool jobs, right? At one point, I was playing tennis with a woman, and she had a career in insurance, and she was looking for a job, and she was just asking me for coaching, and I was like trying to coach her and help her. And then one day my boss said to me, well, you're looking for someone who's done like litigation and administrative operational stuff. Don't you know anybody? And I went, wait a minute. I've been talking to Rebecca, helping her with career search, and she was an insurance litigator, like helping with litigation. I hired her. She is still employed at Cisco after 13 years, and she's doing great things. She's had an incredible career in the tech industry. And if my boss hadn't said that to me, but it actually made my life a lot easier. I brought her on as a contractor. It was kind of a try and buy, and then it worked out. That's the other thing I would say, is register with contracting companies. So they will take you, and they will shop you, and you can get a contracting job for a month, and that could become something that's longer. And that also gives you a little bit of new experience. So those are all tips I would say is it's out there. You just have to make the connections and be a little more, again, you just have to be a little more. My son doesn't want to do this either. He's just about to graduate college, and he knows he has to. But you just have to be, hey, if you're going to buy coffee, somebody's going to tell their story. Their story may help you say, oh, I want to do that, or no, I don't want to do that, right? But I would tell you, even at Pure, we have a lot of roles that we would happily take folks that want to get back in the industry, right?
I love it. A couple of things there, that feeling of fear of networking and not really wanting to get into it, that's so real, but it's just something we got to push through, right? It's not negotiable. We can't not have a professional network and have a successful professional career.
Right, you can't. And you have to remember, think back, take some time, write down all that cool stuff that you did do, and then go sell yourself a little bit. Have an elevator pitch, build it, right? So when you see someone you haven't seen in 10 years, but they're working at the coolest company that you might want to work at, have an elevator pitch and say, hey, how would I get in if I wanted to try and get back in? What do you think would be a good place for me to start? Is there anyone you think I should talk to?
That's
and
the best question.
They'll probably give you like 3 names. Oh, wait, you might be good in this, or you might be good at that. How about you talk to this person? And then it just starts with a conversation that could eventually, but it is hard work. So I will say, finding a job is not, it's hard. But all of you are raising wonderful children, and they are the hardest work. So if you can do the hardest work, you can do this work.
I love it. I love that. And just getting back to that networking thing, recognizing that our professional connections, our personal connections can become professional connections. We don't need to keep those buckets separate of the people that we know. I love that story about your friend, your tennis partner. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So another question in the chat, someone who was in tech and then pivoted away because of relocation needs and not making enough money, but now she wants to move back into tech. What tips do you have for her of making, and this is relevant to all our tech moms, almost all of them are moving into this industry for the first time.
Right. Again, skills, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to have the technical skills. You have to understand where your skills might fit into that world. And then there are ways, so you can get certifications, right? You can go get a technical certification not being employed. And then, for example, talking about Cisco has what's called a Cisco Certified Network Administrator. Pure has this sort of early role certification as well. You can take classes, you can get those certifications. That looks good on a resume. And it looks good when you're having a conversation. I went to learn something about the technology that you do. And that shows that you really want to get back into that, or you want to do that. And we can all do that. It's not as hard as people think. So I would just encourage you, do the homework though. Again, before I think I had 12 interviews for this job. So just because I had a network did not mean I didn't have to have 12 interviews to get this job. And I did the research on the company. I did the research on the product. With each interview, I actually asked people to tell me what does the company do? How does that stuff work? So you do need to study a little bit. But with that, if your skills are there, the technology piece can be taught. So, but don't do what I did and say, I'm not technical, but I really want to work for your tech company. Doesn't go that great, does it? Or I just went and got a CCNA, or I'm working on my CCNA and I'm doing some classes at the local junior college to get my CCNA. Where do you think I could start? What would be a good role for me to enter into the company? It's a very different conversation, isn't it?
Absolutely. So when we're looking at this basic entry level where you started in that technical support, what are the most important skills, both hard skills and soft skills, that we should be working on if we want to enter at this level?
Yeah. And again, I'm not saying, and that is one thing. People may have been here. I would say you're probably going to have to start a little less, but then you're just going to go shoot right over it. So don't you worry about that, right? So that's what I would tell all of you. You might have to enter here. I had this conversation with someone just the other day, but that doesn't mean that they won't end up right here, right? That you won't end up here, because you will. Okay. I would say customer skills, soft skills. Obviously, if you're in tech support or customer service or any of that, just like I did for the water company in my early career, you have to be able to handle that. Negotiation skills, influence skills, tasking, keeping people on task, schedules, projects, understanding risks. Well, gosh, what do we do every day when we try and keep our kids alive? Or we try and schedule them, right? And how many places do you have to drive to get them to soccer? And then the other one to this, and then, oh, don't forget that you have to pick one up from there. So it's not like we don't have the skills. We all have the skills. So that it's just basic communication, the ability to influence, and do not sell yourself short. You have all of these skills, right? You just don't think of them in that way, right? So put that on paper as scheduling, risk mitigation, keeping them alive, other things. And the thing that we all have that, hate to say it, but our male counterparts are not quite as good at, is we are better at multitasking, because we have to be. Getting that one there socks. The other one needs to, has just spilled the backpack all over the floor, right? We have to do it. You have to do it. And many men, again, doing it all day long now and doing wonderful things, but multitasking is a great skill. So I think everyone has the skills, but just framing them in the way that will work in a professional environment. Again, I would just encourage you guys to think about how you would frame that, and then you can talk yourself up.
I love it. That's so valuable.
Confident too.
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it, right?
There were times
I was quaking in my boots. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm up giving a big talk or whatever it was. I don't know. But does anyone in the audience know that I don't know? No.
That was actually my next question. Was you mentioned a couple times through your story about feeling not technical and then realizing that you actually were, and this confidence issue and things like that. So a lot of our women, because they're entering at a different stage in life, but I think this is common for so many people, experience imposter syndrome, that I put myself in too hard of a position. I'm not really ready for this. Is that something you experienced, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, and again, there are so many, and I just see this. So a woman reads a job description and she goes through it and she goes, the skills and experience of that. Oh, I don't have this one. Click, close, not going to apply for that job. A man, or even maybe a confident woman, let's say, reads that same job description and goes, oh, I have a couple of those things. Oh, I'm kind of good at that. Apply. Are you going to get the job if you close the web page? So, it's not, I will never tell you that if I really don't know the technology or I don't know, I will say I don't know, and I will bring in a subject matter expert to help me. But that doesn't mean that I'm not qualified. There are ways to hire people that know that I have gaps in the technology space. I never go to a very technical customer meeting without my principal engineer sitting next to me to answer those questions, but that doesn't mean he needs to have my job, right? So, yeah, I would say there were times throughout my career, a few people said, I think you have imposter syndrome. And I probably did. But again, it doesn't hurt to try. What's the worst that can happen? They don't call you for the interview, but maybe they do. And maybe they hire you, and then you're in. And then maybe you ask a whole bunch of questions and learn a whole bunch of things. And maybe that job isn't going to work out, but you see one over here and now you're in the company. So you can do that job instead. So yeah, it's a hard one for us. And it's one that it's probably the toughest, right? But I think, again, it's almost use your posture, use your voice, just think about how successful you are in so many places in your life and channel that into whatever interaction you're having. That confidence shows.
So the next question I've got is, how do we bridge that that kind of narrow place that we're walking between confidence and coming across as we're bragging? So we have women mentioning, I love this, use your voice. It's not bragging, but sometimes we're worried about that. We're not trying to do it. And sometimes women can be penalized for acting in a way that doesn't meet people's expectations. So how do we walk that fine line?
Yeah, so I asked a woman that when I was probably, 10 years in or maybe 15 years in. And I said, how do I come across not being the B word, right? And she said to me, Laura, sometimes you have to be the B word. And again, I'm not encouraging people to do it, but it's okay sometimes, because what we think of as so over the top and like arrogant is not generally. Or if it is, someone will tap you on the shoulder nicely and tell you, oh, you could have done that differently. So just, or ask for feedback. Did I come across too strong in that interaction? Did I sound, and most of the time they'll say no, but if they say, well, you could have done it differently, then think about it. So everyone has a style, right? And you have to use your own style and figure out what's going to work for you. But I will tell you, in most cases, when I think, oh, that sounded so arrogant and so overconfident, people will be like, you just kind of said you did a good job at something. Right. Or I use a lot of times, another way to soften it is you use the term we. We did this, we did that, the team did this. I led the team to do this, we as a collective. And when you use we, it's really good. But there is a point, if you want to become a leader, senior leader, we doesn't work anymore. You have to then take credit. And I actually didn't get a senior director job once because I didn't use the word I.
Wow, that's a valuable lesson, to recognize that the we is really important, but when you get to a certain point, it has to be about the I.
Mm-hmm. And even if the I is I, and I will tell you, I couldn't do any of what I do without my team, but I still have to use the I to actually make them successful.
All right, we're pushing up at the end of our time right now. The one last question I wanted to ask really quickly is, how have you been successful in engaging those male allies, the mentors and sponsors that you need if you're kind of starting from a place where you don't maybe have that network?
Yeah. First of all, know that most all of them really want to help you, and they get so excited about your success. I mean, I have the proudest big brothers, papas. I have a world out there that is so happier than I am about my success. So just, ask them to tell their story, and ask them how they, what they think, how they think they could help you, and what advice they have for you. And just listen, right? Listen to what they're telling you, and they will want to help you, right? So, but if you don't ask them, they can't do it, but they love to do it. And actually, some of the men who have sponsored me or mentored me or have done all that, they're like, how can we do more? Because they want to, but women generally won't ask. They ask the women, but then the women, like I said, I want to mentor and sponsor as many as I possibly can, but I can only go so far. So just, open the conversation. Ask people to tell their story. People do like to tell their stories. As you can tell, I had a great time telling my story tonight. And then you tell your story too, because your story may lead you to, I knew Rebecca did litigation. If I hadn't known she'd done litigation because she told me her story, she wouldn't have gotten that job. But that was in a personal conversation. So, I would say that's how you enlist their help. Ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. And, if you get don't have enough time, it's not my thing, they're not the people you want to work for or work with anyway. So then find somebody else that does, right?
Perfect. Hey, thank you so much. I think we've addressed the questions that we had in the chat, and this has been so valuable tonight. Thank you so much, Laura, for joining us. It's been inspiring to see your lifelong journey, and starting from non-technical and moving into technical and finding ways to lift others around you. So thank you so much, everybody. We will not have a Better Way Thursday next week. We're taking the break for spring break. The following week, on the 21st, I believe, we will be talking about staying positive during our job search, which is something that can be really difficult at times. It's easy to get discouraged, but we'll have a great speaker talking about that. Everybody, thanks so much for joining us, and we will catch you again in